While Islam has had a limited presence in Southeast Asia as early as 674 CE, it was during the 12th century when Sultan Muzaffar Shah I of Kedah embraced Islam that the religion gained significant influence in the region. As for Cambodia, the roots of Islam can be traced back to the 13th century when Arab and Malay traders established formal trade links with the Khmer Empire. Islam's greatest impact on Cambodia was felt in the latter half of the 16th century. It was in 1641 when Ramatipati was crowned king of Cambodia in the court of Udong. A year later, he converted to Islam and took the name Sultan Ibrahim, becoming the first and only Muslim king of Cambodia until 1658. During his reign, Cambodia's Malay and Cham Muslim populations gained significant political influence within the kingdom. His reign would increase the political influence of Cambodia's Muslim population of Malay and Chams within the kingdom, and his legacy would be celebrated today by Cambodia's small population of Muslims. Welcome to Stories in History. In this video, we will be delving into the fascinating story of the early influence of Islam in Cambodia during the 17th century and the reign of Cambodia's first and only Muslim king. But before we dive into the details, let's take a moment to explore the broader context of Islam's spread in Southeast Asia and the underlying factors that contributed to the emergence of Cambodia's Muslim monarch. First, I want to express my gratitude for choosing my channel for your historical interests. If you enjoy this video, please consider hitting the like and subscribe button. So, without further ado, let's dive into the world of early Islam in Cambodia. The rise of Sultan Ibrahim was influenced by several factors, most prominently the growing presence of Muslims in Cambodia between the 16th and 17th centuries. The Cham once ruled a powerful seafaring nation controlling parts of present-day Vietnam, Cambodia, and Thailand, which had begun to embrace Islam during the 14th century under the influence of Muslim traders, especially Malay. During this time period, Champa had been facing internal struggles. Champa's steady embrace of Islam was part of a broader strategy of unifying the now fracturing kingdom. However, by this time period, Vietnam had already begun to set its sights on Champa. Viet monarchs had fully adopted Confucianism and pursued a mission of spreading Vietnamese culture to neighboring states. This drive for expansion led to the invasion of Champa and ultimately the conquest of the city of Vijaya, contributing to the downfall of the ancient kingdom by 1471. Similar to Vietnam, Champa was also a tributary state of China and sought assistance from the Ming Emperor. However, the emperor only condemned Dai Viet and declined to directly intervene, as their primary concern was safeguarding their own borders and focusing on domestic issues. The Chams also sought assistance from the Khmer but were denied as Angkor had recently been attacked by the Chams. The conflict resulted in several thousand Chams being enslaved by the Vietnamese or subjected to forced assimilation. In the decades following the fall of Vijaya, many Cham refugees migrated to neighboring countries such as Cambodia, Ayutthaya, and the Malay states of Malacca and Aceh. Chams were most prominently invited to work in the Cambodian court, where they became major players in politics and power struggles from the 15th century onward. It would be the rising power of the Toungoo Empire in the 15th century that helped to check Dai Viet's growing power in mainland Southeast Asia and halted Vietnam's continued efforts to annex all of Champa. Parts of the Cham kingdom continued to exist in Panduranga, or modern-day Pan Rang, in the south until 1832, when the Vietnamese initiated the final conquest. The Chams were soon joined by Malay Muslims. Starting in the 14th century, Malays had gradually become the dominant players in intra-Asian maritime trade in Southeast Asia. However, the rise to power of Ayutthaya posed a challenge to Malay influence over trade in continental Southeast Asia. Between 1610 and 1628, King Songtham of Ayutthaya enforced a strict royal monopoly, effectively excluding Malay traders from participating in external trade with the kingdom. Consequently, the Malays shifted their focus towards Cambodia, Ayutthaya's vassal states in the south. Muslim communities had begun to firmly establish themselves throughout Cambodia and played an active role in the kingdom's affairs. However, in the 17th century, Cambodia found itself caught between two powerful neighboring states, Ayutthaya and Vietnam, both vying for influence in the region. In 1594, Ayutthaya launched a military campaign into Cambodia, which resulted in the fleeing of King Bahram Rachia IV to seek refuge in Vientiane, the capital of the Lao Kingdom of Lan Xang. In his quest to regain the throne, Bahram Rachia sought the assistance of two Iberian mercenaries, the Spaniard Blas Ruiz de Hernan Gonzalez and the Portuguese Diego Beloso, along with the support of the Catholic Friar Orders in Manila and Malacca. However, their efforts were repelled by a Malay-led counter-revolt in 1599. In the aftermath, a Malay warlord named Laksamana rose to power and established himself as an independent leader in parts of Cambodia during the conflict with Ayutthaya. Meanwhile, after King Bahram Rachia IV fled to Langshang, his brother Sariopor was imprisoned by King Narusen of Ayutthaya and later installed as a puppet ruler of Cambodia in 1602. However, after Narusuan's death in 1605, Sariopor saw an opportunity to assert independence and brought his sons Checheta and Ote back to Cambodia from Vientiane. In 1619, Sariopor had abdicated the throne to his eldest son, Checheta II, who made his brother Ote second king. Checheta II married the Vietnamese princess Ngoc Van or Ang Chov in 1623. His decision to allow Vietnamese settlers to establish themselves in Prey Nacor, a move that faced resistance from the local Khmer, remains controversial today. Queen Ngoc Van played a prominent role in the Cambodian court for several decades, and she advocated for the settlement of Vietnamese in Prey Nacor, which eventually became known as Saigon or modern-day Ho Chi Minh City after Vietnam annexed the Mekong Delta from Cambodia years later. In 1627, Checheta II unexpectedly passed away. Traditionally, brothers were favored in the line of succession, but Ote declined the throne, allowing Checheta's son to take over. However, as the new king was still a child, Ote became the regent. Unfortunately, a power struggle ensued between Ote and the young king later on, resulting in a bloody palace coup orchestrated by Ote himself. After the coup, Ote declined the offer to become king and instead placed Cheta's other son on the throne. Unfortunately, this king also passed away unexpectedly in 1640. This led Ote to bypass the two remaining sons of Cheta and instead place his own son, Ang Nan, on the throne. It is also believed that Ang Nan was the child of either a Malay or Cham princess. Ang Nan would be crowned Ramatipati and later become Sultan Ibrahim. In 1642, King Ramatipati, inspired by Muslim practitioners of Malay people in Cambodia, converted to Islam and adopted the name Sultan Ibrahim, and he hoped to secure support from the growing influential Malay states. Shortly after, he promulgated a decision to prohibit the raising and slaughtering of pigs and intended to adopt Islamic law in Cambodia. According to Dutch sources, his shift to Islam was partly motivated by a desire to become closer to Malay and Javanese states. Malays had gained significant influence in Cambodia under Sultan Ibrahim's reign. Malay merchants gained considerable prominence within Cambodia. This included two Malay merchants, Lanang and Assam, the former a merchant from Patani who played a prominent role in trade between Batavia and Cambodia, the latter a trader with Dutch connections who began to administer the royal monopoly on international trade. As well, some scholars have suggested that another reason for his conversion to Islam was to further distinguish Cambodia from Ayutthaya, as both nations widely practiced Theravada Buddhism since the 13th century and had shared cultural practices. Ayutthaya, of course, had ambitions to conquer Cambodia, but they faced heavy resistance, so they usually tried to install puppet governments or install courts favorable to Ayutthaya. Another layer within Sultan Ibrahim's rule was the conflict between the Dutch and Portuguese. In 1643, representatives of the Dutch East India Company in Cambodia were massacred or imprisoned by Sultan Ibrahim at the instigation of their rivals, the Portuguese. The Dutch responded with a military expedition a year later, which strained relationships between Cambodia and Batavia for the remainder of Sultan Ibrahim's reign. Sultan Ibrahim tried to coax closer relationships with the Portuguese to the detriment of Dutch interests within Cambodia, which provoked Batavia. During Ibrahim's reign, times were turbulent, wedged between the rising powers of the Malay states, Ayutthaya and Vietnam, and unfortunately Ibrahim made several enemies along the way. Sultan Ibrahim's rule would be cut short due to a combination of internal popular resentment and external conflicts with the more powerful Ayutthaya and Vietnamese states. Most Khmer people were Buddhists and desired to overthrow their Muslim ruler, seeking help from the Nguyen lords of the southern province of Vietnam. In 1658, Ayutthaya's King Narai prepared to invade Cambodia from the west, encouraging rebellions within the countryside against the Muslim king. However, before Ayutthaya could act, a Vietnamese army invaded Cambodia, deposed Sultan Ibrahim, and imprisoned him. He would die a year later, possibly assassinated by the Vietnamese or died of disease. In the immediate aftermath, Cambodia would develop stronger ties to Vietnam, which would waver over time. In subsequent years, there would be unceasing conflicts within court factions who supported closer ties to Ayutthaya and those seeking to align with Vietnam, which would lead to constant conflicts over the next few centuries. Today, Sultan Ibrahim holds a significant position within Cambodia's Cham community, highlighting the deep-rooted relationship between the Cham and Khmer people. Since the reign of Cambodia's first and only Muslim monarch, the small community of Muslims in Cambodia have continued to thrive, serving as an example of peaceful coexistence between Buddhism and Islam. Thank you for taking the time to visit. If you haven't already, please consider hitting the like and subscribe button to stay up to date with future content. Your support means a lot and I truly appreciate it. I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thank you for watching.